Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Straight Talk No BS. This is Landria.
And it's Chris.
And today we're going to talk about knowing our parents' medical information, the importance of knowing exactly our parents' medical coverage, their wishes. It's something that we've been discussing, Crystal and I, and we feel that we want to open up the discussion for everyone else, to all our followers.
Absolutely. And this really hits home to me because while, on vacation this year, I make it a priority to go and visit family that doesn't live in the same state as myself, at least once a year. And due to the pandemic, I have not seen those people in over a year and a half. So, I decided to take my son down and visit family. While down there, my dad had a real live health scare, which for me, growing up an only child, being raised by my dad, I'm very, very close to him. I can talk on the phone with him for about 3-4 hours and both of us not be bored with the conversation. He's literally one of my best friends. So this is a fear for me, for him falling ill or him being in the hospital or him being sick or me losing him. That's a real life fear for me. So for me having to be in a different state and witnessing or hearing that my dad has fallen ill, having to be rushed to the hospital and in an ambulance, I was scared out of my mind. But lucky for me, because we are so close, I know a lot of his medical information, and not just that. Like, I know my dad's social number by heart. Like literally it's in my mind. I know his date of birth down to the year. I know his blood type. I know his medical concerns, his issues, his treatments. I know it all, so lucky for me, when I got that phone call, the other person that was there at the time didn't have all the answers. And luckily they called me and I had the answers. So I gave the EMTs over the phone because my dad couldn't speak, and God forbid if I didn't have the information, like if I wasn't in town or if I didn't go to the hospital and be his advocate and speak on his behalf, where would we be?
Exactly. I can totally relate as well too. Um, I had a similar situation with my dad before he passed. He passed 12 years ago. And prior to that, he was living in Bermuda and I was living here in the States. And I remember getting a phone call from my stepmom at the time, telling me that my dad had a massive heart attack and they were flying him from Bermuda to Johns Hopkins Hospital and for me to meet them there. And I remember panicking. I remember driving the distance, driving the hours to get there. And when I arrived, I remember sitting in the waiting area with my stepmom, and the doctor walked in and had asked her about no had asked actually had asked me what medications is my father on, and because they needed to know. So I remember sitting there and I'm saying none, and then she has says, no, Lan, your dad is on medication. And then she proceeded to pick up a black case, which looked like a little small little carry-on. And my dad at the time was on, I want to say approximately 10 to 12 different medications for various health issues.
Wow.
That I knew nothing about. And we talked every single day, twice a day. And I thought nobody could tell me anything about him that I didn't know. And as I'm sitting there, I'm watching her giving the doctor or reading off to the doctor each medication that he was on and why he was on it and what it was for. And I just started crying. I just started crying to not to find out in that manner, but not only just to find out in that manner, but I couldn't help wonder, why did he tell me? Like, I didn't know. Like, I truly did not know how sick he was. And I found out that day, and that's how I found out. And it's so important to have conversations with your parents, especially when you get older, you move out, you have your own family. It's still very important. I know we have our own lives, we have things we have to do, but you still got to check in. You got to check in on your mom, check in on your dad, check in on your grandparents. You have to have uncomfortable conversations. You have to ask them, hey, what type of medical coverage do you have? Do you have a basic plan? Do you have the best plan? You know, it's not invading their privacy. It's just asking them. You will rather, for me, I would suggest to anybody, you have to have those conversations, ask the questions. If your parents have the basic coverage, you know what? Find out how much it is for them to bump up to the next level, or for the best coverage. If it's a difference of maybe a couple of $100, you can afford it, pay it for them. Pay it. With my dad, luckily, he had very good health insurance. He had very good health insurance. So that was a blessing. That was a complete blessing. Um, and then even when he passed, again, this was the first time my family, my siblings and I had to even take care of funeral arrangements. That again was a lesson learned to us. A lot of families don't like discussing death, don't like discussing burials and whatnot, but we have to change that behavior and start having those conversations. Have the conversations while your loved ones are healthy. It's very important. And how do you feel about that, Chris?
No, I absolutely agree. Like, I don't know if I would have agreed before I went on this vacation though, right? I feel like me being submerged into that situation, like really changed my mind and how I see these things.
Yeah.
Like I even having the conversation at home, like even when I talk to my dad, like you made a good point when you talk to your dad on a regular basis and he didn't tell you
Yeah.
all the information that you needed to know. Like, even though I talk to my dad regularly, I ask him if he's okay. He'll tell me he's fine.
Yeah. Even when they're not fine, they would tell you
Even
they're
when they're
fine.
not
They would
fine,
tell you
yeah. Even when they're not fine, they'll tell you.
yeah.
You
And
know.
that's what happened. In that case of my dad, he wasn't fine. He was having mild heart attacks. Unbeknownst to me, my stepmom knew at the time, and I'll always be indebted to her because she is who saved his life, because he was sick for, I want to say, close to a decade, and many times he was pronounced dead and he would be
Oh,
flown over to
no.
Johns Hopkins Hospital, and he will have a massive heart attack like on a Monday. And then by Thursday, they'll bring him back and he will have no recollection of anything between Monday and Thursday. And that happened several times. He was on the heart donor transplant list, um, waiting for a heart. At that time, it was scary because you don't want to see a parent, especially as close as I was to my father, having to deal with that. For me, it was such an eye opener as far as health and how fast a loved one that you care about can be taken from you. The importance of not just having those conversations of saying, "Hey, Dad, how you doing? I'm checking in, blah blah blah," but to really ask, "Hey, everything's okay with you? What's going on? How's your health? How's this? How's that?" Um, you have to have those conversations. And even when I just mentioned briefly about when it came time where he did pass, having to figure out funeral arrangements. Most people don't have a clue as to where to even start, or better yet, not even just to start, but does your loved one even have the finances or have made arrangements that you may not even know about? So even conversations like that, as uncomfortable as they may be, talking about death, talking about burial sites and plots and stuff like that is a very
And life
uncomfortable.
insurance too,
Right, even life insurance, you have to have those conversations about, do you have a life insurance policy? And not just do you have a life insurance policy, but who is the beneficiary of the life insurance policy? Who's holding the policy? What's the information of the policy? Where can I get my hands on the documentation that I need to prove certain things? When my dad passed, it was sudden. And when I say sudden, it was one minute I remember the night when it happened. Um, he had called my job. I was working, it was a Sunday. He had called me. I was at work. I missed the call. He left me a message like he normally does. And the message was, "Hey, it's your dad, just checking in, letting you know your brother dropped me off at home. Give me a call later, over and out." He used to always say over and out. That was his saying, over and out. And that Sunday evening, I got home and I got caught up in getting the kids ready for school the next day, homework, school clothes, packing. And when I realized I had to call him back, it was about maybe 11 o'clock at night. And I was going to call him. And then I said, no, it's midnight his time. I don't want to wake him up. And an hour later, my youngest brother had called me to let me know that our father had passed.
Oh,
Yeah,
man.
I know. So I appreciated the time that I did have with him, even when he was sick. His biggest wish when he found out how sick he really was, that he wanted to at least live long enough to meet his grandchild. And at that time, none of his children had children. We didn't have no children. And I remember him saying that. And I remember him actually saying to me, daughter, you're being kind of selfish now. You're like, when am I going to have a grandchild? You're married, blah, blah, blah. And lo and behold, yep. And lo and behold, I want to say a few days later, I found out I was pregnant and I was carrying Saquon. And when he found out when he found out I was pregnant, it was like, wow, that's what he was waiting for. Um, and then when he found out I was having a boy, that was like, oh my God, that's like every man's dream.
Mm-hmm.
And when it was time for my due date, he came up here. My dad and my stepmom, before Saquon was born, I remember he made sure, like he was always, when it comes to his grandchildren, I'm gonna make sure my grandbaby's straight. I remember they came up here and bought everything Saquon needed from the time he'll be born. For like the first 2 years of his life, he had everything. Everything you could possibly think of, he had it. And he was in the labor room with me. Yeah, he was there. And when I came here with Saquon, he was the one that did the 12 feedings. I didn't do it. My father did. Mm-hmm. But more so, we have to pay attention because our parents will not tell us when something's wrong. They're not going to tell us, especially when they feel there may be a burden. They're not going to put that burden on you. So you have to ask those questions. You have to ask them what type of insurance. See, with my dad, even though he had experienced what he experienced and he ended up passing, it was an eye opener for my siblings and I as far as having to make arrangements, funeral arrangements. It was the first for us. So we had to kind of figure it out, which we did. And saying that also made us realize we have to make sure we take better coverage of ourselves. Do we have life insurance policies? What in the event if something happened to us? We had to have those conversations. And even though I thought I knew everything when it came to that my mom took ill. And this is why, for me, with my mom taking ill, I could not tell you ever, I don't recall ever having a conversation with my mom asking her about her health. We don't have those conversations. I don't ever recall asking her about her health insurance, or even if she had health insurance. It never came up until she took sick. And when she took sick, it was a completely different experience to when my father took sick. When she took sick, that was when the reality came in like, hold on, what type of insurance does she have? What does it cover? Why doesn't it cover this? It should cover this.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And again, this was another situation where it's like, okay, we just assume that our parents have insurance. We just assume they have that good insurance that will cover a 90%, 10%. We assume it. But most times the elderly, when they get up in age, they already are on a fixed income, that their income, especially if they're paying out of pocket, they can't afford to pay those higher rates. So majority of them, they opt out for the basic plan, where as long as they have something that's basic, that will cover them when they're in the hospital only. But again, there's co-payments they have to pay that's expensive. Sometimes the insurance that they have doesn't cover, transportation, doesn't cover like health aids. So I feel we have to do better as children and really start looking out for our parents, looking out for the elderly or our elder family members, and just find out. And if you're in a position financially to help them, if they have a basic coverage and the difference between a basic coverage and the premium coverage is a difference of $100, you can afford it, pay it for them. Because in the long run, it's going to be better off for you, because if something does happen unexpectedly, now you know they have the insurance to cover the hospital, the medications, the prescriptions, whatever they may, the co-payments. They can have one of the visiting nurses coming to their home, whatever the case may be. If it's a difference of a couple of $100, you can afford it, pay it for them. Pay it and give yourself peace of mind, give them peace of mind. Take care of it. Yeah.
I agree. But, I wonder if the reason why we don't have this conversation is not only is it a difficult one to have, but maybe it's frowned upon. Maybe like when I get life insurance, like when I first got it, they told me like I can't share my information with nobody, They made it like it was very secretive or very like private, And then also like people in movies, right? People always equate giving your life insurance information or your medical history or your insurance information to your significant other or somebody in your family. It's like they're waiting for you to die, or they're waiting something to happen to you for them to take the money. So people don't really release that information so willingly or often to people.
Right. But which is true. But even if they may not announce it to the entire family, then they should have someone, whether it be in a legal capacity, whether it be someone, a trusted friend or family member or someone needs to know where all the important documents are. Someone needs to know that. Someone needs to know if there is or is not a will. Someone needs to know if there is an insurance policy. Someone needs to know or be able to have access to bank accounts, to deeds to property and whatnot. You have to know where this information is. So even though they may look at it, whereas there's a possibility of, oh God, if I tell someone, they can probably try to kill me or poison me. Yes, that is a major concern. But at the same time, too, when something does happen, someone needs to know something instead of everyone scrambling. There shouldn't be a scramble. The same way how people can take time out for other things, take time out for something that matters, because we don't talk about life insurance policies as often as we should. We need to start having these conversations. Life insurance policies is very important. You don't have to get one that's worth $1 million, but you can definitely get something that's comfortable, a little $20,000 policy, something like that. You should have it.
And nowadays, insurance companies will offer your jobs a policy that they offer you for free. Your credit card companies, your banks can offer you a certain number or a certain level of life insurance for free. Okay, so a lot of people don't know that information, but if they look into it, I promise you, you can get a small coverage for free.
And this is information that we need to talk about. Families need to have these conversations. We need to have these conversations, regarding our loved ones. Even if you have the conversation once and then you put things in place, at least at that point there's peace of mind. And then the next generations after you will follow suit. That's what will happen. It should not. You would hope they'll follow suit, but it shouldn't be a seat. It's disheartening when you find, or for me, I've seen times when I first moved here. I remember living with my family briefly, and I used to see how other family members would lose someone, and they will put posters up. And we're talking about 20-something years ago, about 24 years ago. They'll put posters up and say how someone in the family died, and they're taking up a collection. We shouldn't have to take up a collection for our loved ones when our loved ones are here, because the amount of money we waste on things that we don't need, we can take a little fraction of that money and use it for something we do need. You see, instead of buying materialistic things, we have no value, we don't need it. Let's take a little percentage of that, a little fraction of that money. Let's get a little life insurance policy. Let's get that.
Right.
And if we have these conversations in our families about life insurance policies, that'll be something that's common that, it's familiar to talk about, where it wouldn't be such a panic. That's what we need to have those conversations about that.
Yeah, I agree with you. And, people even though some families may have the conversation too, like, oh yeah, I want to have a party when after I, if I when I pass, I want to have a party. I don't want anyone to be sad, or I want to be flown to, Grenada and my ashes, spread across the ocean. Like, people actually make these requests before they go. But the thing is, you don't write them down. You don't
Yeah,
document
yeah.
them. You don't
Mhm,
have
mhm,
insurance to pay for them for those
mhm.
things. So here your family members are, or the
Scrambling.
family members scrambling to figure out, well, damn, daddy wanted to be, buried in Grenada. How do I, pay for the body to be
Mhm,
transferred to Grenada on a plane and then buried there? So now you have to pay for not only the casket and the casket and the clothing and the funeral costs to do it in the US, but then you got to pay for that flight. You got to pay for that burial when you get to the other island
mhm,
as well. So
mhm.
those things, as great as they are being discussed, they have to be documented as well.
I
You
agree.
have to have the insurance to cover what you want as well.
Mhm, mhm. And we do. And this is why we have to normalize having these conversations. It should be conversations that we're not afraid to hear, but we need to have them because it's a necessity. We need to have these conversations about the future. We need to have these conversations about people's wishes. It's nothing to be afraid of because it is reality. And you only have to have the conversation once and then act on it, put things in place, and then live your life. It's
True.
very important.
Very true.
Yeah. Because if we can have conversations in families about irrelevant things, or then we can have a conversation about something that's serious, that matters, that is going to affect the entire family. Because when you don't have those conversations and then something happens, and then what normally happens, everyone's scrambling, people's not prepared, people don't have action money, people have families, then it always ends up left on the one that either makes the most money or is the most well-to-do family member, ends up having to be, and I don't want to use the word stock, but it tends up where they're the ones that ends up having to pay everything, right? It's not fair.
Yeah, I mean, it is stuck because when it gets to them, where is it going to go?
Yeah.
They got to be the ones to pay for
You
it.
gotta, you
So,
gotta you gotta bury a family member. So I think we need to normalize having these conversations. I think we need to have these conversations sooner than later. We need to have family meetings, not just cookouts and barbecues and whatnot. Say, hey, everyone come over for a Sunday dinner. We need to discuss a few things while everyone's in good health. Everyone's in good health, and this is what we need to discuss. We want to discuss, should we get a family burial plot? That's important. How many family
right.
members do we have? Do we need two plots? Okay, so are we gonna get some tombstones? These are conversations we need to have, because these investments they make now in the family plots, the family burial plots, that's gonna be there for generations. So why
Mm-hmm.
not invest in it? Why not invest in? Why not not just love your loved ones while they're alive, but also when they do pass? But that's also planning for the inevitable. And it is not code, but we have to normalize having these conversations. And when we have these conversations and other family members hear it, it becomes normal. Discuss, hey, we got to get some type of life insurance policies. We have children. We don't know what's going to happen. We're not trying to jinx anything either, but it is a reality, right? Let's have a conversation.
Absolutely.
Gotta be
Absolutely. Especially with the younger generation, or this Generation Z that
mm-hmm,
we have,
mm-hmm.
that we're calling it nowadays, right?
Yeah.
Especially for them, because they don't know the struggle. They don't know part of a struggle, right? They feel like, they came into a time where things were easier, internet and social media and school, and things were easier for them.
Right.
So I think, for them, understanding like the difficulties of like talking to your parents and your relatives about health and their issues, they don't see a concern in that because they haven't gone through much, issues for this generation, right? So I
True.
think what we have to do is start with having the conversations in our own home. And as parents and as adults, we got to have it with our kids. Like, if something happens to me, this is what I want done. Just as much as you want, the kids to have it with the parents, we got to have it from the parents talking to the kids as well.
And that's very true, because I know for myself, Suquan, my oldest, I remember I want to say as soon as he turned 18. When he turned 18, I had said to him I needed to talk to him. And I told his 4.5 year age difference to his 18. At 18, or after his 18th birthday, before he went off to college, I remember saying to him I needed to talk to him about something important. And when I mentioned to him I need to talk to him because him being my oldest child, I wanted him to be aware and to know what's in place. I wanted him to know that I do have a life insurance policy. I wanted him to know if something ever happened to me, what's my wishes, what's this, what's that. And he could not have the conversation with me. He could not have the conversation with me. Mm-hmm. So even though I attempted, he was like, Mom, he's like, no, Mom, I'm not having this conversation. And he wouldn't have it with me. So then I waited for about 8 months to a year. Now he went 19. And again, I said, hey, that conversation we tried to have last year, I need to have it with you. It's very important. I said, I know it may be uncomfortable for you, but it's a conversation we need to have because I don't ever want something to happen to me. And then you and your sister are scrambling, not knowing either what to do, not knowing where to find things, not knowing who to call, not knowing what I have, what I don't have. You need to know these things. And he cried. I guess it might have been the thought of him even thinking like that. He couldn't handle it. So again, we didn't have the conversation.
Right.
So what I ended up doing was I ended up writing down everything I possess, everything of value, policies, account numbers, and everything of anything that had to do with me, something happens to me, how he can gain access to this, that, passwords, account numbers, balances, whatever it is, who to call, who this. And I actually wrote out like a checklist with all the information that pertains to me, who to call, what I have, where it is, where it's located, how to get it, what you got to do, and put it in the envelope for him. Because I knew that it was very difficult for him to have the conversation with me. So instead of me applying the pressure on him again, the third attempt was, hey, listen, if something ever happens to me, go here as an envelope there that everything you need is right there. If you don't understand it, or you may not want to be able to, you can't mentally handle it, call your uncle or your aunt, give it to them, and they'll know what to do. That's how I ended up handling it. I ended up discussing with him like that to simplify it.
Right.
So I realized that to have the actual conversation was too much for him. So I had to simplify it, put it together for him, put it where everything's in one envelope. And if you cannot or still unsure, then just say, here, uncle, here, aunt, and go from there. Yeah.
And that was good thinking.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I didn't want to keep on having, making him feel pressured because children don't want to think of things like that. But I still had to put in his head, whereas, okay, we don't have to have a conversation right down to dotting the I's, crossing the T's. So to simplify it, you need to know where this is, where just in case, these are all the contact numbers and this is all the information you need. Mm-hmm. Copies of this, copies of that, copies of this. If you may not understand it, then you go talk to one of your uncles, go talk to your aunt and take care of it. Yeah.
Right. Yep.
We did. Mm-hmm. So even with our parents, even as a parent, I know we've talked about our parents and grandparents, but even as a parent, when your child gets a certain age and while you're still in good health with no pre-existing conditions, if you don't want to have the conversation with your child per se or make them feel uncomfortable, you can do what I did. Put it all together, make copies of what needs to be made copies of, put it in an envelope, put it somewhere between your mattress, wherever it is, and at least someone can have access to it. And they know where to go. You can tell one person where it is and they have access to it. Yeah, that's what you got to do.
No, that's a very good idea. I think I'm going to do the same exact thing because, I didn't talk to my son about it. My son is very young, so, and he's at this impressionable age. He just became a teenager. So I feel like he's too young to have that conversation with him. But I've had it with my significant other, and even he was like, "Oh no, Oh no, I am not having this conversation. Oh no, I don't want to hear it. Something happens to you? Oh no, nothing's gonna happen to you. What are you talking about? How'd you say that? You know? And
But
I'm
that's
like,
a normal reaction. That's a normal
yeah,
reaction.
but
Mhm.
it's not a real one. It's not realistic.
Exactly. That's why we have to change that. For my son, he was like, "What are you talking about? What, you're gonna die? I don't want to talk about that. No, no,
Right.
no, no, no. We're not talking about this. We're not putting it in the universe. We're not jinxing it. No, 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 no." And he just blew me off and kept walking. I'm like, okay. By the time I tried the second time, he still wasn't having it. I thought an extra year would put maturity to him. And after that, I was like, you know what? Let me just remove that pressure and just simplify it and simplify it to the point of, hey, if anything ever happens to me, we ain't got to have the discussion, but this is where you need to go and get everything from here. And if you don't want to go through it, reach out to one of your uncles or your aunt and let them know. My mom has an envelope here with all her information in it. That's it. Done deal. You can't mess anything up.
Yeah.
And
No.
that's what I did. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're right. You're right with that. So, I think the moral of the story is just we just have to have better communication with our loved ones.
Yeah, we do.
Right? And if it's an uncomfortable one, we have to figure out like what is the best way to get your feelings across to your loved
Mm-hmm.
one, right? What is the best way to get what you need out of them? Whatever way that is. And thankfully for me, even for my dad going through that situation, because even for him, he hasn't been in the hospital for, I don't know, years. Since I think I was maybe a kid living with him was the last time he's ever been to the hospital. So for
Mm-hmm.
him, that was also a scare. And it made him, you know, it made him not joke as much as he used to. Like I would ask him randomly, "Hey dad, how you feeling today?" He was like, "Oh, I feel with my hands." Like that's the thing
Mm-hmm.
that he would respond back with. Not, "Oh, I'm okay," or, "Oh, I'm not okay today." Like, no, I feel with my hands.
And parents, they listen, they hide everything from their
Mhm.
children.
Oh yeah.
I thought I knew everything there was to know about my dad. You couldn't tell me nothing about him. I knew everything there is to know. But when it came to his health, he hid it from me. And it was only after only after they flew him to John Hopkins when I found out the severity of his health, like what exactly was going on. Prior to that, he didn't tell me absolutely nothing. He didn't disclose anything to me. And I will always, always be indebted to my stepmom. She kept him alive. She did. She was on it every time doctor's visits. She was there. She wants to know everything. What's the benefits? What's the side effects? What's this? What's that? She was on top of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep, she was on top of it, and
Girl,
I appreciate that.
girl, that was me in the hospital when they kept coming in there talking to my dad about stuff. And I was like, well, excuse me, what is that? What does that do? What are the
Mhm.
side effects of that? He doesn't, no, 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 no. He doesn't need that. He has this. Like
Yeah,
literally what I had to do when I was in the hospital with my dad. And he's laying in the bed, wide awake, listening to me and watching me but I just took care of it all. I just stepped up and stepped in and I didn't care what anybody had to say.
and you have to be like that because even like with my dad, I mean, everyone knows. I loved loved everything about him. And when he passed, it hit me hard, but it taught me a valuable lesson. Whereas you really have to pay attention to your loved ones. You really do. I would have never known anything was wrong with him. He would have never told me absolutely nothing. He wouldn't. And he didn't tell me because he didn't want me to worry. He didn't want me to start stressing out. He didn't want me to be concerned. And I absolutely just lived my life like everything's okay, like he's gonna live forever. You couldn't tell me he wasn't healthy. You couldn't tell me he wasn't healthy. Yeah, in my
Right.
eyes, he looked healthy. He was healthy,
Right.
but he
Look
had a
healthy.
bad heart.
Yeah.
He had a very bad heart. And even if my mom right now has aggressive dementia. She has been in an assisted living quarters now for about, I want to say 2 years, getting into her third year. And when the pandemic hit, she was one of the residents of the facility that was in the hospital. She was there for about what 3 to 4 months and was touch and go. And prior to that, my siblings and I had a conversation regarding my mom. We had a conversation saying, hey, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if, something big is going to happen, but we cannot be naive to it either. And my eldest brother had made some inquiries and whatnot as to, if something did happen, what the cost would be, what are we looking at and whatnot. So we all came to the decision where it's okay, if something happens to mom and we do have to bury her, well, this is how much it's going to cost. Divide that amongst all of us. This is each of us responsibility. So while she's still living and whatnot, instead of waiting to the last minute or being hit with a bill like, oh my God, what are we going to do? We have all put money aside. So when say if the day does come, we can say, hey, here's my portion, here's my portion, here's my portion, here's my portion, and take care of what we have to take care of. Yeah. And that, but we only was able to think about that, to think about how will we handle our moms, in case our mom gets something happens, it's because of what we experienced of our father.
Right.
Yeah, that's how we learned. That's how we knew, like, oh my God, that's how much a funeral costs. Wow,
Yeah.
that's how much a burial plot costs. Wow, how many bodies can it hold? Oh, how much is yearly maintenance? All of that you got to consider. You have yearly maintenance. Listen, you have to buy a family plot. That's money, a few thousand. Then even when you buy the family plot can hold X amount of bodies. So you have to even analyze that. Then there is maintenance you have to pay yearly for them to keep the upkeep of it, to make sure it's clean and everything. You need to think about that. Then you have the funeral services. You got to pick the coffin. Then you have the programs and all of that. All of that costs money.
Yeah.
All of that. So we don't think about that. We need to. And if we are not in the position financially to pay for that, then we have to discuss life insurance. Even if that means they may not have a life insurance policy now, they can always get one. They can get a small policy, $10,000, $15,000. It's better than nothing. Get a little policy and pay it. Even if they may not have the funds to pay it themselves, it's easier for the family to come together and pay for a life insurance policy, a monthly payment for their loved one than not to have it. And purchase it while they're in good health as well, too, without pre-existing conditions. So even those type of conversations, we need to have this uncomfortable conversations with our loved ones now, while they're healthy, while they're alive, while they're capable of giving their input, while they can give us the information we need. We need to ask them, what type of health insurance do you have? Let me see what your policy involves. Let me see what's the policy above that. You know what? Let's bump you up. If we bump you up, what more do you gain from the better policy? Do you have any wishes? Is there a family burial plot anywhere? We have to have this conversation. Do you have a life insurance policy? How much is it? Who's the beneficiary? Maybe you have to update the information on it. Dot our I's, cross our T's. All of that has to be done. I advise that to any family. I mean, my family, we found out, the hard way. Once our father passed, then our mom took sick. So moving forward, that's what prompted me to talk to my young son. That's what prompted me to talk to him. I was like, you know what? I don't want my children to ever be out there scrambling, not knowing, so that's what made me have that conversation. I didn't want to have it, but I had to. And I wasn't able to have the conversation how I wanted to, but I found another way, an alternative way to still have that conversation indirectly to give me peace of mind. Yeah. And when things change, or if things change along the way, it's update the information.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have to start having those conversations.
Oh, yeah. I definitely agree. I mean, I hope we got across to some people today with this topic, because I do feel like it's, yeah, man. I told you, if I couldn't tell you last year, if we had, I would have been like, oh no, I'm not, for me, my dad, oh no, but going through it and actually living that moment, like I feel I have a different tune.
Yeah, especially if like you're an only child.
Yeah.
If you're an only child, have that conversation with your parent. Because at the end of the day, when your loved one takes sick and they end up in the hospital, and it may happen, the percentage of it happening is quite high. You want to make sure you know everything. You want to make sure you know exactly, what you're against, what you're up against. You want to have that information. You need to have the information.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need to have it. And you need to have that conversation with your loved ones and ask them, hey, is it something I need to know? Because they're not going to voluntarily tell you, because no one wants to be a bother. Like, no one wants to bother anybody with their health issues or any pre-existing conditions. Nobody wants to do that, but we need to get away from that too and have those conversations. Your loved one should not have to find out while you're in the hospital what you've been going through by yourself. See what
Yeah,
I'm saying? They shouldn't
absolutely.
have to find out like for me, I found out about
Mhm.
my dad at the hospital when they had already considered him dead. When my father was flown to Johns Hopkins Hospital, the hospital in Bermuda had told my siblings, start making funeral arrangements.
Wow.
Yeah. They said they've had that conversation with them at least 2, 3 times. We think you might just start having funeral arrangements. It doesn't make sense keep sending him to Johns Hopkins Hospital, but every time we flew him overseas, what happened? He lived another 2 more years. Fly him overseas, he'll live another 3 more years. So obviously there's a disconnect somewhere between the Bermuda hospital and the hospitals overseas. That's a whole nother topic right there. But they had already at least 2, 3 times had suggested us start making funeral arrangements. There's no need to fly him overseas. But the minute he was flying overseas with that good insurance, see that health insurance, the
Yeah.
health insurance is everything. If he didn't have that health insurance and would have had to have maybe the basic health insurance, you would have to pay for transportation yourself. That can run you anywhere from $60,000 to $100,000 if your insurance doesn't cover it.
Right.
A lot of families can't afford that.
Mm-hmm.
So this is why we have to have it. And again, I did not find out the severity of his health until he was flown overseas. And I was sitting there confident as ever saying, nope, my dad's healthy. And little did I know. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And also to point out too, like you said, though these things are very expensive, like funeral arrangements, and
Mm-hmm.
though they are so expensive. And I feel like if once these companies or agencies realize that you come to them without insurance or without coverage, they may even charge you double the amount, triple the
Yeah.
amount. How would you know?
They'll take advantage of you. They'll take
Yeah.
advantage of you.
How would you know?
Yeah, exactly. But I want to say a little sidebar. So when my dad was flown to Johns Hopkins like a second time, like 3 years later after the first incident, I was better equipped. So I thought. So he had a massive heart attack. I think it was like on a Monday morning. By that Monday night, they flew him to Johns Hopkins by that Tuesday, because Tuesday morning I had arrived at the hospital Tuesday. I remember walking into his room and he had all the hoses and everything down his throat, and they would keep the ventilators and everything, keeping him alive and whatnot. And I want to say Thursday, late Wednesday night, Thursday morning, they had pulled the tubes and everything out of him and was starting to kind of bring him back slowly. And eventually they brought him back slowly. So I want to say by Thursday afternoon. So when I first saw him, I could not handle seeing him laying there in the bed in that state. With all the hoses and wires, and the eyes were taped shut. It was just too much for me to handle. I remember I couldn't handle it. Thursday, color was back in his skin. He was alert. He was aware of what was going on. I remember walking in the room and looking at him saying, "Hey Dad, why you look funny?" He's like, "What?" I said, "Why you look funny? Something looks wrong. Like, what's going on with you? Something looks a little off on you, right?" And girl, he says, "Boo, boo, get my teeth," right? So I was like, "What?" So he was saying
Right.
to
What does that mean?
my stepmom, he was like, "Boo, boo, you got my teeth?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Right? And she was like, because she's always calling him Jackass, like a pet name. I don't listen, there's two or something else, but she's always calling him Jackass. She'd be like, "Jackass, look at the nightstand, it's right there." And girl, he pulled open the nightstand, took out a little pouch, and popped his teeth in, a full set of goddamn teeth. Listen, I was like, "What the hell is that? You ain't got no teeth?" Listen. So when I say parents don't tell you everything, yo, oh my God, Crystal, he was like, shut up, nobody asked you nothing. I say, seriously, Dad, you didn't have no teeth? Those are not your teeth? He said, yes, they're my teeth. I paid for them. I'm like, are you serious? I said, let me see you smile. Do you know he had those teeth for about 10 to 15 years, and I never knew, none of us ever knew.
Wow.
She knew, but we never knew, not a dang thing, nothing. Nothing. And had he not taken sick, I would have never known that he did not have any teeth. He had a full set. He got all his teeth pulled at some point and got a full set. Yeah, I never knew. And they were sharp because I never knew. I never detected anything. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember that. When he asked, Boo, where's my teeth? I was like, what? What did you ask for? Yes. Oh my God. But I enjoyed this conversation. I hope that everyone is listening. It is going to bring some awareness to have those conversations with our loved ones. Especially now when you're in good health, there's no health issues, no health scares, no pre-existing conditions. Let's do something about it. Let's change it. Let's have the uncomfortable conversations for the betterment of the entire family. We have to have those conversations. We have to start looking into life insurance. Listen, it only takes one person in the family to make the change. Any one person, just takes one person to start the conversation.
And then also that now that there's COVID,
yes,
COVID-19, COVID-22, Delta, Lambda, UK, whatever these new variants are out there.
Yeah.
I would imagine that, for us who haven't been sick or who have fallen sick and survived, it'll be time to look to have that conversation and, and start to build the process if something was to happen to you. Because catching COVID and being in the hospital, you can't even see your family. They can't come see you. You don't have a phone, you're to call your family on a regular basis. You're not going to be able to speak to these people regularly. They are going to need to know what to do on your behalf if something happens to you.
Exactly.
So we got to start changing that narrative today. We have to start having that conversation as soon as possible.
I agree 100%. I agree.
This was definitely a great topic. And, I appreciate you, Lana, because you wanted to talk about this today.
Yes, because it's important because, I am so grateful for our podcast because topics that everyday people don't discuss or may not be aware of, we need to have those conversations. You always hear of the rich and the wealthy having life insurance policies and this and that in place. We can have the exact same thing. The everyday person can have the exact same benefits. We just need to know about it. Someone needs to just educate us and inform us. That's it.
Bottom line, that's how we grow. That's how we glow.
Yep, I agree.
Don't forget to check out our other videos on our YouTube page and follow us on our social platforms. That's on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. We talk about a lot of stuff on there all the time. So we want to hear from our listeners. Like, share, comment, and subscribe. And we'll see you guys right here, same time, same place next week.